Time is limited, but we've got quite a lot of ground to cover relating to the House of Commons resolution of the 1st of November, which instructed the government to give to this committee the impact assessments arising from the sectoral analyses that you have undertaken on Brexit. Now, you told the House in your written statement of the 7th of November that, and I quote, "It is not the case that 58 sectoral impact assessments exist," end of quote. So is it your contention that the reason why you have not handed over the impact assessments is because you don't have them? Is that correct?
There is a formal definition of impact assessments followed by the Civil Service, I think published by the Better Regulation Task Force, or Better Regulation Unit anyway, which lays out what they are. And we don't. That's not the form of the sectoral analyses. The sectoral analyses, which were started back in 2016, are essentially looking at what the industries consist of, looking at the size of them in terms of revenue and capital and employment and so on, looking at their involvement in the European market, looking at their regulatory structure and so on. Now, it's all very useful and it's the underpinning of a lot of policy, but it's not a forecast of the outcome of leaving the European Union, or indeed various options thereof. So that's the first reason that, and I think that point has been made to the House in the motion leading the loyal address motion. It's been made by me previously in this committee and in the European Union Committee and so on. So what we tried to do was to give you as best we could, under the conditions which I specified in the letter to you, which is without undermining our negotiating position and without compromising commercial confidentiality or sensitivity, market-sensitive data, and so on. And that's the instruction I gave to my department. It's the instruction, effectively, it gave out to the rest of Whitehall. Remember, these sectoral analyses are spread out all over Whitehall, and the ownership of the information is all over Whitehall. And that's why we did what we did, to give you what we thought was the best we could, or the closest we could come to the House of Commons motion.
So, just to be clear, has the government undertaken any impact assessments on the implications of leaving the EU for different sectors of the
Not in sectors. I think the
economy.
What we do have, or not do have, the Treasury, of course, has got an OBR forecast, which has an implication. Although even that's pretty crude. That's done from the average, I think, of all the external forecasts of impact on the economy and so on. So there's no sort of systematic impact assessment.
So the answer to the question is no.
Yeah.
So the government hasn't undertaken any impact assessments on the implications for leaving the EU for different sectors of the British economy. So there isn't one, for example, on the automotive sector.
On the
automotive sector?
No, not I'm aware of. No.
Is there one on aerospace?
Not I'm aware of.
No. One on financial services?
Well, I think the answer is going to be no to all of them.
No to all of them. Right. Now, doesn't it strike you, Secretary of State, as rather strange, given experience around the committee in which you have, the government undertakes impact assessments on all sorts of things all of the time, that on the most fundamental change that we are facing as a country, you've just told us that the government hasn't undertaken any impact assessments at all, looking at the impact on individual sectors of the economy?
The first thing to say, Mr. Chairman, is when these sectoral analyses were initiated, they were done to understand the effect of various options, what the outcome will be. You don't need to do an impact assessment, a formal impact assessment, to understand that if there is a regulatory hurdle between our producers and a market, that they will have an impact, it will have an effect. The assessment of that effect, I think I've said to you before, is not as straightforward as people imagine. I'm not a fan of economic models because they have all proven wrong. When you have a paradigm change, then as happened in 2008, when you had the financial crisis, all the models were wrong. In fact, the Queen famously asked, why did we not know? Similarly, what we're dealing with here, in every outcome, whether it's a free trade agreement, whether it's a WTO outcome or whether it's something between in those spectrums, on those spectra, it's a paradigm change. So we know in terms that not the scale, not the size, but the order of magnitude of impact. Now, when we come down, and the second point to make is that when we started I'm now calling them impact assessments. When we started the sectoral analyses, I did not know in my mind whether we would end up doing an analysis, doing a negotiation sector by sector. Right? That was the first thing to understand. Whether we did a separate negotiation for automotive and a separate one for financial services and so on, or let's say asset managers, to pick one out. We didn't know that at the time. It became very apparent very quickly that was not going to be the approach. The approach in the timetable available which would work and which would actually serve our negotiating purpose was an overarching free trade deal. So individual sectoral analyses will not be necessarily informative on that. They're informative in terms of who's vulnerable. I'll come back to that and talk about regional effects in a minute, but it's important to know who's vulnerable, but the actual impact assessment, as you term it, is not necessary piece by piece. We will at some stage, and some of this has been initiated, we will at some stage do the best we can to quantify the effect of different negotiating outcomes as we come up to them. Bear in mind we haven't started phase 2 yet. In particular, we will try and assess, in bigger categories, the effect of various outcomes in financial services. We will try and assess the effect of various outcomes in terms of the overarching manufacturing industry, agriculture and so on. We'll do that a little closer to the negotiating timetable. Now, they fall precisely in that area which I described as negotiation sensitive. So if, for example, I had two options for an industry, A and B, that we're negotiating with the European Union, and one of them will be beneficial to the tune of, 50 billion, just pick a number out of the air, and the other option will be negative by 10 billion. I'm not going to publish that just before I go into negotiation with the Commission.
Right.
Okay. That's the point. Now, when they come, I can tell you they're there, but I can't give them to the committee at that point.
Right. Well, I'll come on to what you haven't given to us, but you've just said to us that you haven't done that work yet. You've said that there are no impact assessments. You were hoping that at the October Council the door would be open to phase 2 of the negotiations, where the question would be asked, okay, so what does the British government want? Sure. Are you actually telling us that the government hadn't at that point, and still hasn't, undertaken the assessment that you've just described, which you say we will do at some point, when you're hoping at the December Council to open the door to phase 2?
I reiterate the point, Mr. Chairman. The strategy we decided back way before the October Council, before March, indeed before the triggering of Article 50, was that we would go for an overarching comprehensive trade deal. That will cover all sectors, not one sector. And within it will be a financial services sector, and then there will be some other tiers, some specific ones like data, I think I said to you, and so on. Some of those you can't quantify. On data you could not quantify the impact of data, but it's obviously a highly high effect qualitative impact.
Okay.
Now, I haven't quite finished, Mr. Chairman. And therefore, the usefulness of such a detailed impact assessment is near zero. And given how we were stretching our resources to get where we were at the time, then it was not a sensible use of resources.
Right. Now, if you're saying that the usefulness of that is near zero, why did you tell the Foreign Affairs Committee on the 13th of September 2016, and I quote, "There is the sectoral analysis. They are working through about 50 cross-cutting sectors. What is going to happen to them?" That sounds like an impact assessment to me. What did Lord Bridges of Headley mean when he told the House of Lords EU Internal Market Subcommittee on the 13th of October 2016, when he said, "We have segmented the UK economy into roughly 100 production sectors. We have looked at those to understand the size and contribution that each of these sectors makes to the economy and used that to support our analysis of the impact on them of BrExit." Now that sounds very clear to me that the government has been looking at the impact on individual sectors, and yet you've told us a moment ago that you haven't done that yet.
Yeah,
now, which is it? Either it has happened or it hasn't.
Yeah, I'm talking September 16, where we've basically been in existence over a summer, from July, August, September. We were still looking at that point of what strategy we would undertake. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, as you said, what is going to happen? Well, that's the point of the sectoral analysis. You've got in there indications for every industry what the regulatory burden or regulatory effect is, what the market sizes are. That's what informs you. And size and contribution, ditto. That should be in the analysis you've been given.
But with respect, Secretary of State, that doesn't answer the question I've just asked you, which is, you said that we're looking at what is going to happen to them, referring to cross-cutting sectors, and Lord Bridges said we are using the analysis we've done of 100 production sectors to support our analysis of the impact on them of Brexit. Now, I'm still trying to get clear.
The fact he uses the
either
word,
you are looking at the impact, or your department is, or you aren't, but it can't be both. So which is it?
We are looking at the effect. I mean, do not draw the conclusion that because you use the word impact that you have written an impact assessment. There is, and I took it when Ms. Malhotra, I think, was pressing me on this, that she was looking for a quantitative economic forecast of outcome. That is not there. Yeah? That is not there. We haven't done that. What is there is the size of the industry, the employment, and so on. That is important, and of course it describes the effect of the policy. And the government, of course, is looking at the effect of the potential policies, but hasn't written an impact assessment. At the point, some of these things will come up with, in the subsequent primary legislation coming through. We've got some stuff on customs and so on, and in that there will be an impact assessment, because an impact assessment is normally accompanies a bill, and that will be there. But that's an impact assessment that we're looking at the effect. That's why, in response to the motion, we tried to give you as close as we could to what the motion asked for. That is taking the sectoral analyses, making sure they're up to date, making sure that they're accurate, and giving them to you.
Okay.
That's what we did.
Now, in answer to a question from Seema Malhotra when you appeared before the Select Committee on the 25th of October 2017, the question was, has the Prime Minister seen the impact assessments? You replied, she will know the summary outcomes of them. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us what it was she was looking at?
Well, she would have been looking at the policy documents put in front of Cabinet and Cabinet committees. The point of the sectoral analyses was to provide the underpinning knowledge and understanding for deciding on various strategies. So, if a strategy on data was being discussed, then she would know, because in that strategy would be that summary outcomes are a very infelicitous phrase, but it's a bit more than conclusions. It will be how regulatory dependent it is, what the size of the market abroad is, those sorts of things. They will be in the policy papers put to the Prime Minister and to the Cabinet Ministers on that relevant committee, whichever one it may be at the time.
So there is material in existence that assesses the impact on different sectors. That's what.
Well, it's what you've been given, Mr. Chairman. That's the point. Nothing more than that.
I don't think that is what we've been given. But anyway, we shall come on to that point. You were very straightforward in your letter to me in saying that there is certain material that you decided to withhold from the committee, as you set out in the letter. Could you just explain on the record why you took that decision?
Yes. I have responsibilities as a minister, which include, of course, protecting the confidence of information given in commercial confidence, protecting market-sensitive information, but most of all in this context, protecting the negotiating position of the British government. That's the necessary position. And some of the data which will be most sensitive to that will be data prepared just to assess the likely outcome for the UK of individual policies that we agree with the European Union.
Okay.
That's one.
Now, can you point to any wording in the motion of the 1st of November that either instructed or allowed the government to withhold such information before passing it to the committee? And if there isn't, why did the government accept the motion rather than seeking to defeat it or to change it in some other way or bring forward another motion?
The first thing, as we started out saying, Mr. Chairman, is the motion asks for things that don't exist. That's the point. It asks for things that don't exist. So I tried to get as close to that as I could within the parameters that my duties as a minister allow. The second element of why we voted or didn't vote, I'm afraid it would not be wise for me to pass comment on decisions made by chief whips. It would be probably more than my life would be worth.
Almost sounds like an expression of regret, but I won't read anything into what you've just said.
I say what I say, Chairman. I do not express regrets or otherwise unless I say so.
Right, fair enough. Seema Malhotra, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Secretary of State, for coming to give evidence today. Could I ask you first, did the committee get in the two Leverage files, the 800 pages, the studies that existed before and were referred to as completed in the Freedom of Information response I received from your department on the 29th of September?
I don't remember the Freedom of Information request. What date was it?
It was the 29th.
No, that's important. The date is important.
Said, sorry,
Ms. Malhotra, the date is important, please.
Yes, it was the 29th of September. However, you had also said...
Of this year.
Of this year,
yeah, okay.
Yes. However, you had also said on the Andrew Marr show that these studies were completed, and you'd said that in June 2017.
Yeah.
So I just want to understand whether what we've received are the same documents as you had reports, as you had said were completed.
Well, I think you've got my Permanent Secretary coming on later, and he can tell you exactly how they were adduced, but I'll give you my attempt. These.
Sorry, Secretary. I'm
going to give you a full answer.
I think it's a fairly straightforward question to ask you whether what you have given to this committee in these two Leverage files are the same reports as you had seen and had said publicly in June.
And that's why I'm going to give you a full answer, if you forgive me.
Okay,
you did ask me once before to give you yes or no answers, and it wasn't a very informative outcome. These reports were started. Actually, I think I commissioned them in the first week of the existence of the department, and they have been evolving over time. So none of them are static. New things come in, new understandings of the information, new comments from the industry. You read every day in the Financial Times comments from various industries, which is why I asked you the date. Right? So and what has been done in producing these reports is these, and the other thing that's happened over the course of that time is they started as just DEXU documents, but they've become documents belonging to all the various departments as they update them and inform their own policies along the way. So the documents you'll give, bear in mind there's some things not in them because of what I said. They will be as up-to-date as possible. So very likely with the 29th of September, if there's anything that's not the same as that, it'll be things that have added in afterwards.
So I am not sure if I'm understanding this correctly.
Say again, sorry.
Are these the same reports that were completed and you publicly stated were completed? Or
as I said to you, the word complete means we've written a report. It doesn't mean that they stay the same. They've been evolving over the entire 18 months or more, whatever it is, since they were first commissioned.
Okay. You said that these reports hadn't been edited as well, and they haven't been redacted. So I'm trying to understand whether what we've received are reports that have effectively been largely written in the last 3 weeks, or whether they are indeed the reports
they're compiled
that
from
have been shared with the Cabinet Committee and subcommittees as you've just described.
They are compiled from the existing reports. That was the intention. That's what, and as I say, my Permanent Secretary will give you the detail of it when he comes on.